Hello and welcome to The Real World. I'm Jacques and I'm joined by Matthew Mullen. And tonight we're talking about finding yourself. How are you doing, Matthew?
Again, much like last time, Jacques, that radio voice has got me amped.
I think a good way to start with talking about finding yourself is a quote especially. I was looking and thinking a lot about this topic, and I came across a beautiful quote by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, who was searching for meaning in a concentration camp, and he came up with this. He said, "Life is not primarily a quest for pleasure, as Freud believed, or a quest for power, as Alfred Adler thought, but a quest for meaning. The greatest task for any person is to find meaning in his or her own life." And I think that's a good point to start from.
Yeah, that's a great point. It picks up from our conversation last week as well. And that is exactly the the problem slash challenge that I've encountered now, where I am in life with my own search for meaning. Um, but I would ask you this from the beginning. Is this thing finding yourself, finding meaning? How would you define this term, this phrase, finding yourself? I mean, what comes to your mind when I say finding yourself?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think it breaks down into two distinct groups for me.
Okay.
I think first finding yourself is about finding out who you are, and then finding yourself is about the second thing is who you want to be. And
Okay, but
they're both very different, but to answer those questions, you have to find yourself in the sense that mm, you have to find out what it is you like. You have to find out what it is you want to do. You have to find out what it is that brings out the best version of you or the worst version of you, and that's how you go about finding yourself.
okay, that's it's great that you've used the terms versions of you already, because that is something I'm going to ask you a little bit later.
Okay.
But I think I know what you mean when you say who you are and who you want to be, but how would you how would you explain to someone what it means, like trying to find out who you are, first of all, because that was your first point.
hmm Well, trying to find out who you are is a surprisingly difficult task, which most
Yes.
people, I think, actually don't do well or never even really contemplate. So if someone was to ask me, what do I mean by finding out who you are? Uh, I would probably say that a very good way to determine who you are is to try and hole yourself up for a week and find out what it is you feel you can't live without, and what it is you need to do. And that's really a very good indication or a starting point for finding out who you are, I think.
Chuck, worst advice ever, because this is why. This is why. 'Cause this is okay. This is why. Um, because I've done that now basically for 6 months, and it's led me into the deepest, darkest hole of all time. but but I thought initially I'd received the same advice that
I wouldn't give
from
that as advice. I'd say to someone
or
that's a
or
good place to
rather
start.
rather that is a place that I was told that's a good place to start. Like, lock yourself in a room and see what it is you can't manage without. But where that's led me is I don't really care about anything. Unfortunately, it's led me into the wrong
Yes,
area
well,
where I've lost all meaning.
there is a very important reason I say that's a good place to start, because I think not everybody gets to that point where you are now, where they are like, I don't actually care about anything. But similarly, for me, I got to that exact same point. I kind of did lock myself in a room or isolate myself. I've done so many times throughout my life, and I've realized very easily there is almost nothing that I couldn't do without. I'm very much uh, adaptable to whatever I have, and I'm relaxed and comfortable with whatever it is that I seem to be with. So the reason that's a good starting point is because that's your first indicator, I think, of what kind of person you are. Are there things in your life you already know without a shadow of a doubt you can't live without? Or actually, are you the kind of person who doesn't really need anything outside of themselves? And I think that's an important question, because then the second step is, okay, so since nothing has been lost by me isolating myself, clearly the problems are inside of myself. Whereas if you had the opposite reaction, then you'd be like, okay, the outside world is where I realize I have needs and things.
That is, again, you've just sprouted universal wisdom over there.
Yes, okay.
You've explained that incredibly well, and that's now exactly what I've realized. But it's something that I've realized my whole life, and now it's really sunk in,
Yes,
where I know I can do without stuff. I know I can do without material things. I can do without contact with people, really. In a sense, I've been working myself consciously into this position my whole life, this position of I just want time alone to figure things out and to
yes.
write or to do my own thing. That's what I've been seeking, and now that I've got that thing, now I don't know what to do. So that, I guess, that leads very well into the second part of your definition, which is finding meaning. So how would you speak about that?
Um, okay, I will tell you about that right now, but I think the first thing that I say that is very important is for me to make a little, like, addendum to what I just said before. A very
Okay.
important thing to discover about life, which I discovered, was that a lot of the real truisms about life in a person's life that they actually live is common knowledge. But I think there's two kinds of knowledge. There is learned knowledge, and there is experienced knowledge.
Yes, I
Some
agree
things,
completely.
some things you can learn, but you won't act upon them until you've experienced it. And other things, when you just learn about it, that's enough. That's enough for you to take action. And so the reason I would recommend the kind of starting point I would is because I believe, I could be incorrect, but I believe that isolating yourself and finding that out for yourself is experience knowledge. It's something you have to go through before you can get to the next understanding.
Okay. Yeah,
To
that
Sure,
I
go.
mean, again, that it's weird, man, because it's like maybe it's that I feel like I've learned these lessons before, and now I have to learn them again. Like, it's almost like I learned them and then I didn't act on them correctly, and
Yes.
now I have to relearn them. And it's so frustrating because it feels like now it's years later and I'm back where I was, except there's this stretch of stuff I've done in between. That's the only thing that's different.
Mhm. Well, that's a good point. And so I'll answer your question, and then I'll ask a question exactly on that.
Okay.
When you decide what you want to be, um, the reason you have to go through that process, and that's not the whole process, it's the starting point of the process of who you are. But the reason you have to go through the process of who you are is because you really have to look into your soul and be like, you know what? I'm really terrible at this. I'm really, I'll use myself as an example. I'm really terrible at staying fit. It is something
Okay.
I truly, truly struggle with. Um, it's the kind of thing that I almost realize I need to do it with a buddy, because I myself do not have the strength of character to motivate myself to do it every morning or every evening. So finding out who you are is really important, so that you can look at something like wanting to be fit and be like, you know what, I suck at that. And then you can be like, but I do think it's something that's important to me. It's
Mm.
important to me to be fit or to be healthy. So I have to surround myself with a person who's going to help me achieve that goal of what I want to be, being healthy, being fit, because it's something that I can't find within myself at the moment, at least.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Then it comes down to exactly like how you said it. You know certain things are important, but you're naturally not skilled at them. So what can you do? You have to trick yourself. You have to find a way that you can trick yourself to get this thing done that you know needs to get done. Almost like a way to upgrade yourself, a way to improve an area of weakness that you know is important, but you know
Yes.
is your natural weakness.
And that's why you
Yeah.
have to start with finding out who you are, because you can't really say, this is what I want to be, um, until you know that you are that person. For example, J.K. Rowling knew who she was when she wanted to write Harry Potter. She knew she wanted to be the kind of person who spent hours a day living in this fantasy world, writing about this children's story. And so the very next step about what you want to be, acting on that, was very easy for her because it was something that she naturally wanted to be. It was something who she naturally was. But maybe in a different area of her life, she doesn't know who she wants to be. Because that's the thing, when you try to find out who and what you are, it's an ongoing process. It's not, there's no
Yes.
magic bullet of like, now I know everything about who I am, and I can stop and I can focus only on what I want to be. You find so many people in the world are really successful at business, but they're terrible at their social life, because they know who they are at work, but they don't know who they are in their private life, socially. They're amalgamations of what they think other people want to be socially, but they're really authoritative at work and they know what they want to do and what they want to get. So you can have real handle and control over one area and a major deficiency in another. And finding out who you are is coming to grips with this, like, okay, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, but I'm bad at this, and how can I fix that? And this thing that I am good at, how can I make it even better?
Yeah, again, that's a very good point. Um, then what I would ask you next, following up on that, is I'll bring up an example from your own life. So you and I have this passion and interest in guitar playing and in making music,
Yes.
and you spent years of your life studying to be a sound engineer, and you learned all these skills and you were good at it, and you were in radio and you have this ear for music, and all these things were leading you to be a certain type of person. You got to a certain level of success, but then life threw this thing at you. And this thing was you had to have an operation on your ear, and now that's messed up. There's a physical deficiency in you now that's messed up that perhaps career trajectory you had in mind, or whatever you envision for yourself has been compromised by this operation, this physical thing that you can do nothing about. what
It's
what do
true.
you do? I mean, how do you handle that? What's the next step? What
Well,
have you done?
the first thing I think anyone should know about me is I do believe in a life philosophy of life will fuck you. So try to be fucked by someone you like. Uh, it's very important advice, I think, because I think so many people they get destroyed exactly because of that. They have this one thing that they were going to be. This is their shot, and something happens. This curveball out of nowhere completely ruins that one dream. And that's why you should have more than one dream. Like we spoke about last week, it's very important to understand you are uh, good at many things. You have many wants, you have many desires, and you should be planting seeds in your life to make those grow now, because something could happen unexpectedly and completely derail you. So
Yeah.
you ask me how I recover. Well, that's the thing. That's what I learnt by going through that unprepared. Um, I didn't have a backup plan when the physical deficiency set in, and they were like, okay, but you're never going to be able to mix again because your hearing is really bad now. I'm sorry. And you're never really going to be able to have the same talent you had before. It was really hard. That's the truth. The truth is not some like Hollywood movie where it's like, oh no, I just woke up and I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna go and do something else. No, for a long time that actually led me on a very negative life journey in one respect. I went through a very strong phase of believing I can no longer do anything of enjoyment. What I mean by that is I enjoyed playing games, video games. I enjoyed just reading fiction. I enjoyed all sorts of silly things like watching anime or something like that. And I immediately after that I was like, oh my goodness. At any moment, these things like wanting to be good at guitar or wanting to travel the world or wanting to be a professional sound engineer at an international radio station or at a big national station, they can all be taken away from you. And so there's no time for playing a video game. There's no time for that, because if I do that, I'm getting rid of time to play guitar and to write a song which I might not get a chance to write if I don't play guitar. And initially I thought that was really, really good. So one of the first things I thought I did, I instituted this: only do things you enjoy which are productive. And things
Okay.
you have to do. Don't do anything that's not going to be productive. But I learned it probably only about 6 months ago, I would say, that actually that was causing a lot of unhappiness and dissatisfaction in those areas of enjoyment where I was productive. For example, a big part of my enjoyment, which came from playing guitar, happened by reading fiction books or playing games, and I'd see something which impacted me emotionally and inspired me to do something creatively whilst writing or playing guitar. And I didn't have that, so I went through this long phase where I haven't been as creative in the songwriting process, and I've only realized that a large part of that was through the denial of these what seemed to me to be unproductive activities.
Yeah, I've had a very, very similar experience in that regard. For the
So
longest time, I've done the same. I've only ever focused on, I'm only going to read books that I want to, like, in the style of how I want to write, and I'm only going to listen to music that is like how I want to play or write, and I'm only going to focus on these things in my life that are going to gear me towards being a better person in these narrow regards. But all it's done is made me incredibly narrow-minded.
yes. So that's the thing. For me, it was an interesting one because I never used to be that kind of person. I'm
Yeah.
generally very eclectic. Like, you'll hear me listening to Jeff Beck give us some smooth blues on the guitar, and the next day I'm listening to System of a Down, like raging in my headphones. And I found a lot of balance by listening to music in that way, and by reading fiction and games and any entertainment that way. But after the radio thing, I was like, no, now I have to be a serious grown-up, and serious grown-ups don't have fun. And I have discovered, by learning a lot more about people like Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, two of my heroes in the scientific world, that actually a lot of their greatness comes out through them being a little bit silly, enjoying things like comic books. Then Neil deGrasse Tyson is a big comic book fan, and that actually is part of his inspiration for being a scientist. So, to me, in the last 6 months, I've actually done a complete 180 in that regard, and been like, you know what? I schedule my fun in the sense that I'm like, you know what? I've got to do these serious things today. But if I finish each and every one of those tasks, then I can play for 2 hours. I can just play games for 2 hours. And it's been a great experience because suddenly I can feel a lot more emotion and ideas and creativity flowing through my body than has for a long time. Now, is it a permanent fix? I don't know. But it at least is helping me now in that respect. The second thing I could say about how do you go through an experience when you get told what you're working towards is no longer possible in terms of the radio, is that it makes you realize, and I think this is a very important thing to realize, that a lot of that life is in flux, and so nothing is stable, and it actually lends you a kind of flexibility in life where I now don't mind if I travel the world until I'm 35 before wanting to be serious. Because I've realized, and I don't think many people do realize this, that stability, whether it be in a relationship or in a career, is just an idea that we create. So many people in my family and abroad and working in life, they work for 30 years in a company. And they're like, I love working in this company, and that's great. They do love working in that company. And then one day their company closes down and they get retrenched. And they have nothing to fall back on. Their whole life falls apart because they believed in this stable idea. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying don't be a person who gets a 9-to-5 job and does a stable thing. But what I am saying is it's very important to not have the stable mindset. A lot of people, I think, get trapped in that, like, no, this is the way it has to be mindset. And the problem with that is when the world changes, as it inevitably does, at random intervals, all those people get left behind and are out now, because now the world doesn't conform to their ideas anymore of what is stability. And that allows so much freedom and so much opportunity if you're willing to have the mindset of flexibility. A real world example of that would be looking at our parents in South Africa. They grew up in a time where a job was a job for life. You became a teacher at 18 or 21, 22, whatever the age may be after university, and that's what you were. You were a teacher for 65 years. If possible, you'd like to live in a great school in a certain area and just stay there. That would be the dream. Get a great job first time and you're done. And people who were renegades in the sense of, no, I want to be a wanderer and stuff, were almost seen as like, that's a risky lifestyle. Whereas the world has kind of changed now with the online boom, where now people are changing jobs on average every 2 to 3 years. And career is an outmoded thing. But unfortunately, people with a stable mindset, such as my mother, they can't wrap their head around that. So I think she's fortunate in the sense that there are still a few stable jobs going around, and she's got one. But many people weren't as fortunate as her and had this stable mindset, and now find themselves in a position of like, oh, the world's changed and now I'm out. And I think having that complete life change at like 23, 24, where you can't, now it's over, no more a radio for you, was a harsh lesson. But I think it happened early enough in my life that it's really beneficial to me that I was young enough to have a mindset change and have it be effective.
It's crazy how you've explained that, because, again, that speech you just gave me, that is the speech I gave my parents, let's say, 1 month ago. And almost overnight, for no reason, one day, everything you've just said, I believe fully, and it just magically went away. And I now feel like I'm almost 27. I've lived that nomadic wanderer lifestyle, it's been amazing. It was the best thing ever. But now I'm back home and I realize for the first time in a very deep way how I am left behind. I don't have any of the skills in terms of the marketplace that all my peers coming out of college and varsity or even high school now have. And but it's completely my own fault because I've not been keeping up with trends, say, or I've been working very much on my own philosophies and getting my mindset right and doing achieving other goals, and which I've done. But now I'm faced with this grim reality of, well, if you need to get a job now with a BA, you're in trouble. There's Unless
Okay.
you've picked up all this online social media, a bit of Photoshop, a bit of design, have written copy for places uh, as as an intern or for free for months and months and months, you're kind of stuck. And again, now I haven't. I've been compiling my CV and I'm about to start sending it out. So I don't know the reality of the situation. I don't know what's going to happen when I put myself out there. But in my head, that's how I feel. In my head, I've
Okay.
constructed this bleak world of you've
Uh,
fallen
uh,
behind for
yeah,
myself.
can I just say something? Now, there's a couple of very important things in that. The first thing I want to say is, I don't mean that getting a job in the world that you keep consistently for a long time, not a non-nomadic lifestyle, is stable. I mean, it's the mindset I'm speaking about. You can have the stable life, but it's the mind. You have to have the flexible mindset. So even when you're living the stable life, in your everyday actions, you are flexible. You're doing other side projects. You're doing other things. So
Right.
it's not about what your career path is. So if I explain that poorly, I do apologize. Uh, the second thing is, I view life kind of as a pyramid, in the sense that people fall into different positions. Uh, some people, and the skills vary for each position. So you view your life as if you have fallen behind. You view your life as if other people have got these skills. Now, the first thing I want to say to that is, I understand completely, because I've been stuck in Hermanus. So I have been through that. And being stuck in a small town, very repetitive lifestyle, very limited options, can feel claustrophobic. It can feel like, oh my goodness, time is going past and I'm stuck here and nothing's happening. That happens. Uh, a very big part of that, in my opinion, has to do with just being stuck in a small town, as opposed to being an actual problem. It's one of those, it's a false cage that sits down in your mind, I think. But to get to the point, so there's this pyramid of people, and the large majority of the people are at the bottom of the pyramid. They struggle to survive. They really are unfortunate, and our job as people in better positions is to try and get as many people as possible out of this bottom rung of the pyramid, in my opinion. To go away from being a person who lives in a tin house. Now he's got himself an actual proper house and a decent life. To get a person away from being stuck in a minimum wage job. I think because I come out of not necessarily a tin house level of poverty, but a poor mindset, a poor mindset of family. It's very important for me to, when I leave the world, if possible, leave it with helping as many people out of that position as possible. So that's the bottom level. It's people who have very little opportunity, not necessarily because they have little opportunity, but because they haven't been educated or had the opportunity to be educated in such a way as to recognize opportunity. So they might get a golden chance and spurn it purely because they don't realize it. The second level of the pyramid, in my mind, is the average intelligent person. Finished school, went to university, became a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, a teacher, something. There's a little bit of there is a little bit of I would say not as much risk in this lifestyle. It's a very safe choice if you in general, if you do it. You're guaranteed to make a slightly above average salary. You're guaranteed to be able to afford a reasonably comfortable house, and if you have children, put them through a good education and continue the cycle. It's a stable choice, and these are the positions where most people view the skills, like, beyond like mechanics and electricians and stuff like that. But skills like, oh, he's a teacher, he's a lawyer, he's a doctor, and he can do this thing which is impressive. He's an accountant, he can work almost anywhere. Everyone has an accountancy firm. So these are the skill positions. And that's the second level of the pyramid. The third level of the pyramid I view as almost a game changer pyramid. It's the artistic pyramid, because either it's right at the top, or you find yourself at the end in the bottom with all the people starting over from scratch. So this pyramid is the adventurous one. People might say to you, you don't have the skills, because, and understand from my point of view, my whole life I haven't had the skills, so I'm just kind of making it up as I go along. People will say to you, you haven't got the skills. People will say to you, what are you going to do with that piece of paper? It's not a great piece of paper. Or what are you going to do, because you can't do anything with that? But I believe that's a lie, firstly. But okay, that's beyond. That's not the point. The point is, in this lifestyle, in the artistic lifestyle, what's essentially happening is you are saying, I'm going to forge a path. I'm going to take the road less traveled. By the way, in the Robert Frost poem, I believe the point is not to take the road less traveled, actually. But that is the choice you're making. You are saying that, you know what, I am going to risk it all on my dream of a creative idea. And you don't have to be limited to the arts solely in this. Entrepreneurs fall in this category. People who are like, you know what, I've got a vision for a business, and this business can work, and anyone can do it, and they take this step outside, and they're like, I'm going to try and walk where no one's gone before. I'm going to try and invent a product no one has done before. And it's the greatest risk, but it's also the greatest reward thing. Now, the real problem is most people are not comfortable with that, because it's the position, I believe, with the most responsibility. You have to have the most self-discipline, and you have to have the strongest will or character, in my opinion, because you're gonna have the most disappointments, you're gonna have the most rejections, you're gonna have almost everybody from the other levels, which are the majority of people, saying you're gonna fail, it's not gonna work, and the truth is, there's a big chance that they're right. But the thing is, if you choose to go down this path, I believe on a personal level, it is the most self-satisfying one. It's the most self-rewarding path. So, you have chosen to write this book. And should you finish it, and even one person sends you an email, and he's like, my word, you've blown my mind, you've opened my eyes to a new way of thinking, and my life has got so much more meaning from this. Will that not have been worth it? Will all that sacrifice not have been worth it to you?
So, again, I'm agreeing intellectually with everything you've said, and I've lived that life
It's the
up
most
until
difficult.
this very moment. It is the most difficult moment, and it's true. I think about that. I think about someone reading my work one day and emailing me and being like, "You've changed," because I've had that experience before. People have, in the most unexpected places. I've just had a conversation with a friend's brother, and a month later he comes into my room and he sits on my guitar amp and he says, you know what, that one conversation we had, which I thought nothing of at the time, he said, that changed the way I see the whole world. And it
Yeah.
was amazing to hear that. But great, so I write this is where I am now. I'm at the point where I write this book, cool, I'll get it done, put it out, then what? Then then I've done it. But then it's what I mean by then what is then what in terms of reality, like I need medical aid, I need money, I need a place
Okay.
to stay,
No,
I can't live
but
at
so
home
here's
all
the
the time.
so here's the
Yes,
thing. We've all seen uh we've all seen, let's say, uh Iron Maiden or Metallica or Muse playing a live concert, and it's blown our minds. You can
yes,
insert your favorite artist. We've all seen uh Leonardo DiCaprio play Gatsby and been like, you know what, I didn't think he had it in him, but by goodness, he's been a great Gatsby and he's blown our minds. Or if you don't like Leonardo DiCaprio, what's wrong with you, firstly, but secondly, maybe Robert Downey Jr. in the first Sherlock Holmes movie. What a great portrayal, a reinvention of Sherlock Holmes, and very true at the same time. But what a great, and we've all seen these great performances. But the truth is, we've also seen these great performances by that video on YouTube. Here's a hobo on a street. Oh my goodness, what an amazing, mind-blowing, just as mind-blowing. Here's this
yes.
great performance by these dancers in this style of dance that's unfortunately never going to make them millions of dollars. But wow, it blew my mind. And the thing is, here's the first question you have to ask yourself before embarking on an artistic life, which is why you have to find out who you are, is, can I accept that? Is that me? Am I strong enough? Am I the guy who would be happy to be the hobo on the street? Am I strong enough to be that guy? Am I willing to push my art to the level to be that guy? Is that how important it is to me? And the thing is, so many people embark on these ideas of like, no, I'm going to do this, but they're not willing to accept the consequences. And in my opinion, one of life's greatest lessons is you have to be willing to accept the consequences. If I want to do X, I have to be willing to accept Y. If I, for example, I dream of going on tour with our band, for example. And to me, if that means at 33, no one really liked our stuff and now I've got to start over, that to me is worth it. So I am willing to be the hobo on the street. So I know that that's who I am. It's a decision I've already consciously decided. But everyone has to decide that for himself, and they don't have to make a public decision or a public announcement, but they have to be like, if I'm going to live the artistic lifestyle, I have to accept the artistic consequences. I have to understand that medical aid isn't guaranteed. Medical aid is for the people in group number 2 of the pyramid, not for the people
Mm.
on the artistic lifestyle. If you get lucky, you get the best medical aid. But if you don't get lucky, you get no medical aid. And that's just part of the risk-reward thing. You have to be willing to accept that. The second thing as well about... Oh my goodness, I've gone on so long now, I've forgotten what the second thing was. But so let's speak about that first, and then I'll think about it a little.
Okay. Again, this is what's striking me so deeply over the last month or so is, and again, this is something I wanted to bring up earlier, which I may as well bring up now. What about these? I guess these different versions of yourself is something we spoke about earlier, and why this is hitting so hard for me now is, again, I am and I was that guy who just gave all these speeches you just gave me. I am
I
that
know,
guy.
I've heard you give
I,
many a
and
great
I and
speech.
I've lived that life my whole life, and now that has
That's
changed.
fun.
But I guess it's not changed in the sense that that guy is dead and gone. It's changed in the sense that maybe I've now discovered for the first time this other part of me in a very real way, because I am very idealistic. I am very positive and full of energy, and inspiration. I want to just go out there and do stuff, and I'm willing to just go with the flow and take chances, willing to do that, and I've done that. But there is this other part of me that's incredibly practical and incredibly realistic and accepts zero bullshit from
That's
myself.
fair. That's important,
And now
I think.
and now that guy is in control. Now that dude has got the reins for the first time. That practical dude has always been in the background, just keeping me alive, I
Okay, but
guess.
so
But
I have to say,
so that's
I
what's
have to
happened.
ask you that
Yes.
question while we're there. Why is that practical dude not involved with your artistic side?
What? How do you
For,
mean? I don't
so
exactly
you
understand what
say
you mean.
you've had all these ideals, you've had all these dreams, you've done all of these things that you've dreamed about doing, these crazy adventures, and traveled the world, uh, stood for what you believed in, but you have a disconnect with that guy and practical guy. Why do you have this disconnect? For example, I'm extremely idealistic. I'm extremely passionate about following my dreams, but I do not have a disconnect with practical. I'm still here making money, earning a wage, uh, and living my dream, but also being practical at the same time. So my question to you is, why do you have this disconnect?
Okay, I understand better what you mean now. And the answer is I don't know. I just have no idea. It's what's thrown me now. That's why I'm so
That is
rudderless.
a fair
Because
answer.
maybe it's because this practical guy now has, for the first time, he's in control. He was never in control. He was like a tool. This practical guy was something that I could use, and now he is dominating. Now his worldview is is has taken over my life. But what that's done, if again this is practical guy speaking, but the truth of it, that the truth of the moment is practical guys' ideas are shaping my day-to-day thoughts, but they're not resulting in action. They're resulting in paralysis. So what they're doing is they're making me think I need to go get a job. I need to do my CV. I need to do all these things. I need to get this. But what that's causing in my life is for me to basically just mess around the whole day and think about stuff and not actually do anything. So it's taken me like 2 weeks to get a CV
Mhm.
together. It's ridiculous.
Okay, so uh, I have two things to say to that. The first thing is I want to ask you, why don't you use a buddy? In the sense that, why don't you force yourself, in a sense, to uh, because maybe within yourself you don't have the ability to change it. That's what I'm saying. So why not use a buddy? So why don't you force yourself into deadlines by having someone there as a, oh, you said you were going to do X me. For example, why didn't you to use the CV example, you could say like, okay, good morning, Dad. This afternoon, I'm going to. I would like you to look through my CV and just tell me if you think it's good. And it forces you to finish it by this afternoon because now you've said this afternoon I'm going to show my CV. So why don't you create these deadlines for yourself? If you can do them by yourself, great. But if you need someone else to do it, why don't you try to do that? Second thing is, if you haven't really started to take action, have you really made that decision? Is my question.
Yeah, now that I'm glad you brought that up. So exactly what you said, that buddy system I've done and it works. It's great advice. It really does work very well in all sorts of aspects of your life, from in everything. So I've done that now, and what I did was once I got everything done, I just told people what I was doing, and I sent my CV off to be proofread by a few people, and I've told both my parents now they need to start asking me every day, have you applied for something? Have you sent something off? Until I actually do it. But I know that the reason I haven't actually done it yet. Probably the deepest reason I haven't actually applied for anything yet is this thing. I, I haven't fully made the decision yet. Is this going to be my life now? Am I going to throw myself into this working world? And that's where I'm at. I know I haven't fully made that decision. And now practical guy is saying, well, no. What's happening is there's the old version of me that's saying, no, just go with the flow, just follow your dreams, follow your passions. And now there's this other part of me that's saying, you're gonna have to follow your passions in your spare time and try and get a real job to survive. And there's this other part that is there's this other part that's been around with me for the longest, and this part is the what we were speaking about last time, like the faith, destiny, purpose. It almost doesn't matter what you do, you just have to do something. And that's what I've always believed in. I've just done something, and I haven't necessarily I haven't overthought things to the sense of them causing paralysis.
Okay.
But that's happening now.
Okay, but so here,
it's just so confusing.
I believe actionable. Everything has to be actionable. So, you want to follow your dreams, is that correct?
Yes.
So you're trying to find out, your position at this moment is you really don't know who you are.
Yeah, yes, it's that I thought I did.
Okay.
I did. Well, how about this? I did know who
Okay.
I was.
But it's changed. You've gone through this thing.
But now I've gone through this thing.
Mm-hmm. It happens. Who's never doubted that? But that's the thing. That happens to everybody. But the thing is, so make it actionable.
Let me say it a different way, though. Okay, let me explain it a different way. I've always been very straight up with the facts of what I've done, but now for the first time I'm reinterpreting the value of the facts, or the meaning of the facts, or the story. So there's this quote that I love so much, which is, the past is all that the past is. Literally all it is a story you tell yourself.
Okay.
And
it's good
quote. I believe that to be so true, because it really is. But the story I've told myself based on the same facts has now changed. And it's changed in a negative way for the first time. The very same facts I used to interpret as funny, positive, unique, quirky things, I'm now interpreting almost as deep flaws in what and who I am. And that is what's throwing me so much.
Well, this is so to take that directly. I believe my position on that is I am non-religious, but I hold that Taoistic principle that everything is a double-sided coin. It's not that those things are not flaws. It's not that those things are not quirky, interesting, fun things. It's that they're both. It depends.
Both, yeah.
It depends on the moment and the place and the time and the context of your life, and how you use that. So how do you find out who you are if you're very confused? So half of you or part of you still wants to follow your dreams. Part of you still is like, I want to do this. Another part of you is like, but listen, you can't. You just can't. It's not reasonable. And so the best way to solve that is, I would always recommend a couple of things. If possible, because this one is often not possible, but if possible, take a week in a dramatically changed environment. For a whole week, just don't do what you're doing now. So for example, if you've been writing every day, no writing for a week. You've been living at home constantly, no living at home. Just, if possible, you leave your entire environment and your rules and your structures for a whole week. As a rule, I kind of ironically, I try to live every seventh week as a different week. I don't know. I chose the seventh week kind of ironically with the biblical seventh day. I thought to myself, it's very important that I get into these routines of what I want to do and who I want to be, but I should take constant breaks. And so every seventh week, what I do is, and I'm not perfect, I have difficulty, but every seventh week I really try to take 7 days and be like, you know what, this week, no meat, let's say. That's what I think. You know what, a whole vegetarian week and no reading non-fiction books. Pure enjoyment novels. No working on any projects whatsoever. And I give my brain a completely different experience. And if possible, I'll take a little trip, or I'll try to find a little day or two to be by myself in an isolated environment or with friends or something. And I find if you can take a week, I like 7 because it's long enough that you can be serious, but it's also close enough that it's constantly intervening in your life. For me, so then it gives me a refresher, almost like a recharge in many of my tasks. Now, I'm not sure that that would work, but I recommend, if possible, always take a week. Just change everything. And maybe you'll find that your stagnation is not that it's a problem, it's that you've merely not been away from it for long enough. So it's not fresh. It's too worn. It's too done. And you need that break. The second thing I would say is, if you feel you need a change, in that week, why not do it as well? If you need a change, but you are caught between two things. So let me give you an example. I will give a real world example. I want to come home to South Africa for Christmas. I also want to be practical and save as much money as I can. And I also want to keep the good clients I have. So they're both very disconnected, because most of the time my clients will be like, no, in Russia, December is a working time. They only take off from January. So I try to find out a way which makes both parties happy. I try to compromise in such a way that I will then get my holiday, but also keep my clients satisfied. And so what I then have done is I find a suitable tutor with whom they're happy with whom they're happy, and that they're willing to do, and I walk them through and I introduce them, and the one tutor comes with me the one lesson, and they meet them and they're like, yes. And when I leave for a fixed agreed upon period of time, that tutor will take over my classes, and then I can return. And because I've been a really good worker, and I've given them enough advance and warning and things like that, they've agreed. So I've solved that problem by finding a reasonable conclusion. So now that's a very simple example, because it's fairly easy for many people to do. But another example would be, you want to keep your creative projects alive, but you also feel it's time to start becoming practical. So the best way to do that is to define your job search in such a way that you are pursuing jobs in which you have the capability to still pursue your dreams. For example, if you wanted to only be a writer, a good example of a job you might want is a job with very little, I'm not saying this is the job you should get, I'm giving an example, with very little actual work at the job. It's mostly it's important for you to be there kind of job. There are jobs like that, because then you can dedicate 60% of your day at work to writing whilst at work, and still be earning that practical salary and those practical benefits, and still be performing your job task, because there's only 40% of the work. So your goal would then be to try and find such a job where you can both pursue your dream and do the job. Now, that's a very easy example, and there will obviously have to be a bit more compromise. But that should be your goal. If you still really want to pursue your dreams, you should define your job search in such a way that it will not prevent you from pursuing your artistic goals as only a hobby, but as an actual active dream. So you should define your search in such a way. So you're almost like go on the offensive. Don't be negative. Don't be like, oh, I just have to accept it. Like, no, this is the kind of job I want. This is the kind of job I'm going to get. And you go out looking for that. And you're confident. When you see that job, that's your job. That's the job you've been looking for. And that mindset, I find, is a very successful mindset in meeting that compromise when it does come up in your life.
Yeah, Jacques, that's incredibly good advice again.
Can you live it?
Probably
Sorry.
The biggest problem now for me is just this cloud of negativity, because I'm now experiencing firsthand what it does to your mind, what it does to your energy, what it does to your ability to get stuff done in the day. I mean, I'm living at home, I don't have a job, I have the whole day to do stuff. And when I was pumped up and energetic, and I was writing like 12 hours a day, it was outrageous. I was just working so hard. And now with purely a different set of, let's call them programs operating in my head, doing nothing. It's hilarious. With no external factors have changed, only internal ones.
Well, that's why I say I often advise, like, or I would recommend taking a break, just a complete break, as much of a break as is possible, because you want to you need to assess your position, but you can't do it from where you are. So taking that
from where you're in,
yes. So if you take that break, when you come back after a week, your mind is fresh, you're feeling good, you've had different energy, so you're not stuck with that same feeling you had from before. And you'll know how you're approaching that. Are you coming back and being like, oh my goodness, I have to write, and you get the sinking feeling of dread, and you're like, oh my goodness, it's not what I want to be doing? Or are you like, that's exactly what I needed, I'm ready to get back into that mood now? And that's a big indicator of where you are. But you can't make that decision now, because right now you're just dreading everything, because you're like, oh my goodness, if you're wasting time, you're like, oh no, I'm wasting time. If you're being productive, you're like, I don't really want to be productive. That's why the break is so good. What I was going to ask you is, talking about you being sidetracked, talking about these things that pull you out, what checks did you used to have that used to work that aren't working anymore in keeping you motivated and keeping you active? Have you got any checks in place?
Checks to just, can you just redefine that? I'm not entirely sure what you mean.
For example, a check would be like the CV thing with your father. I'm going to give you my CV this afternoon to review for. I'm going to finish my CV today. Will you give it a read for me? And your father says sure. So he's a check. He is there to ensure that you get your thing done. So that my question is, you say your productivity's been going down, and you've been losing focus, and you don't want to. But my question is, everybody gets sidetracked. Now that you've been getting sidetracked, what checks have you got in place? Like, what used to work for you that isn't working now, or do you not even have any in place?
Okay. I would use checks if I found myself, if I became aware of myself getting sidetracked, then I'd put checks in. But normally I'm incredibly diligent and incredibly dedicated, and I don't really need them. When I have a clear task in mind, then I just do it. It really isn't a problem for me. But
that's a difference between us.
The problem, yes, it's just that I'm just depressed at the moment, and everything is bleak. And So let's just move. I don't want to. I don't want
Okay,
to sink
segueing the
into a
conversation into
negative
a
thought.
completely
But
different one.
I want to ask you this because this will be helpful for me, and this is where we started out, and I think will be helpful for anyone who hears this. Is you spoke about right at the beginning. You spoke about there's two parts in finding yourself. The first part is figuring out who you are, and the second part is then making meaning, creating meaning in your life, because that is where that's where I'm at now. I need to make new meaning where there isn't any at the moment. So, what exactly do you mean by making meaning, and then how do you do it? What are the actionable
Okay,
steps?
so there is no silver bullet. There is nothing that works for me that is guaranteed to work for someone else. Uh, that's why those self-help books keep selling, because some guy writes a book with 400 pages about exactly what he did and what he does, and millions of people read it and they go like, yeah, that's what I need, and then they don't change. They stay
And then they don't
exactly
do
the
it.
same. And it's because the only real way to actually change is with action. It's easy to philosophically be like, that's a great idea, but unless you actually do something to make it happen, it's not going to change. I'll give you an example. I wanted to wake up every morning at 8 o'clock or 8:30. I wake up at 8:30. And the reason I wanted to wake up every morning at 8:30 was because I felt I would get more time in the day to get the rest of the things I want to do done. And even if I did nothing all day, I would still have more time. And so that
Mm.
was a personal decision. And I am terrible at it. But what did I do? I put my cell phone really far away from where I sleep. And I have no choice, because it's really loud, but to turn it off. And by the time I've got there, I'm already awake, and so I have to then stay up. And then I'm a little bit grumpy for about 5-10 minutes, but after that I think, great move, I'm up. Yes, I'm happy about that. But so that thought of I want to wake up at 8:30 is nothing without me taking the action. So whenever you decide, how am I going to make meaning, the right next to what I want to do, what I want to be, you have to put what you're going to do about it. And you literally have to start immediately. Because the classic mistake of everybody, I'm going to start tomorrow. And tomorrow never
Mm.
comes for a person like me. Uh,
Mm.
because tomorrow I'm like, yeah, nah, yeah, and I don't do it. So, you ask, how do you make meaning? Well, that really depends on who you are, which is why you have to answer that question. So, how do I make meaning? I can answer. It's very simple. I decide what I want to do, and I put it on a list, and then that's it. And I say how I'm going to do it, and when I don't want to do it anymore, I take it off the list. It's as simple as that. It's not very complicated for me. I'm a simple guy. I've read self-help books that were mean to me. I've read self-help books that held my hand while I walked on a beach at like sunset. I've read self-help books from a brother perspective, a father perspective. I've listened to scientists tell me why you should find meaning in life. I've listened to religious people try to tell me, and I've realized that it's literally just a bunch of people who don't know the answer as much as I don't know the answer. And they're just giving the best version or the best answer they can possibly come up with. So, the first thing to realize is when you decide what you want to be, is that no one else really knows what they want to be, and no one else really knows how to do it. Because if they did, we'd have far more successful people in life. So I advocate there are certain steps I can give you. I like to split things into manageable chunks. And the reason I like to split things into manageable chunks is it's easy to fix one thing at a time. It's easy to fix something small. a lot of the problems that someone has is they try a new diet, an exercise routine, a new reading style, a new way of watching things, and they try all of that at the same time. Like they wake up on a Monday and they do that first day fantastically, and day 2 they don't do it because the shift is too big. So I like to break down things in manageable chunks, in the sense that, so the first thing I did was I adjusted my sleeping schedule. Then I adjusted my breakfast. Not my whole eating plan, just my breakfast. Then I didn't adjust my lunch. I changed it up. I was like, no, now I want to take just 30 minutes every day, and in these 30 minutes every day, I want to do a dream. And so for 30 minutes of each day, I would play guitar. And I would do that because it's something that I enjoy. That's a goal. Then, so at this point, it has been like, and I took a week on each one. So it was a really slow process. I tried to like ease myself in. And so for the first week, all I did was make sure I wake up at 8:30. The second week, all I did was wake up at 8:30 and eat the right breakfast. And then third week, eat the right breakfast and take 30 minutes a day. And here's an important thing. I have a punishment system that works for me. So,
Cool.
a lot of people are like, I'm going to reward myself. To me, I already know I can reward myself, so it doesn't mean anything. So I had to find a good punishment system. And my punishment system was very simple. I couldn't do a punishment like give a big amount of money, let's say, to charity. Because I'd be like, yeah, I'm giving it to charity. So it wouldn't work. But I could do, I'm not going to earn any money. And to me, that was like, or for me, that was effective. But maybe for you, it will be something else. Like, let's say you should take something you already don't have a problem with. Let's say you don't have a problem with going to Muay Thai. That's easy. You can stay fit. But you say to yourself, if I don't do this thing, I can't go to Muay Thai. And then you don't go to Muay Thai. And because it's something you're really good at, and it's something you really want to do that isn't a problem in your life, you will be like, no, I have to do it, because that's the thing. You shouldn't take something that you're going to fail at. You should take something you have no problems at not failing at. So, for example, I have no problems at playing games. Playing a game for 2 hours is really easy. But if I say to myself, if I don't take 30 minutes every day to work on a dream, I have to give that game away to some random person. A game I've spent money on and given it to, then I'm going to be like, no, I'm not going to do it. And it's very important that you do it. So I personally am strong enough to stick with my punishments. But maybe some people have to buddy up. So my strategy is very simple. Take one thing at a time, change it over a slow period, give yourself a punishment so that it keeps you motivated. A reward thing doesn't work for me, but a punishment thing does. And a lot of it is trial and error, and I update over time. What do you do? I ask you the same question. Maybe you have a better answer than I do.
Again, it's never really been a problem for me. Motivation has never been a problem for me, except now.
Okay.
And I'm aware of these things that you've brought up. I'm aware of them. I haven't tried any of them myself because I just haven't needed to yet. I have recommended the same things to other people. It just, a lot of the stuff I've done kind of unconsciously, and I haven't needed to. So, for example, like a buddy system and asking people to, rather like, let's say, when I was writing, here's an example that I can use. When I was writing, I'd say, I'm going to tell everyone I'm writing, and then I'm going to start sending out samples so that I can get feedback. And then immediately that makes you work harder. You know, you feel you have an obligation and responsibility, and you're writing for
I
someone on
enjoy those
purpose.
samples.
And then that helps. But that's, I mean, it's obviously something I did consciously, but I didn't
Yeah, yeah.
need to put that in. I just knew that it would help, so I did that anyway. Um, yeah, I mean, again, Jacques, that's really, really, really good
The
advice.
problem is
Just,
the problem is
yes,
action for me. So I understand, and the reason
yes,
I come back on this all the time is because, so you have never had a problem with being diligent, and that's something. So for you, this is the first time in your whole life you're struggling with this lackluster feeling of like not giving a fuck, literally not caring to do.
yeah, yeah,
And the problem is, I would love to be able to help you because I struggle with this on a day-to-day basis. But the problem is, I struggle with this on a day-to-day basis. There's not like this massive solution that I'm like, if there was, I wouldn't be struggling with it.
mm,
So I literally have to constantly revise and constantly update myself. Because here's the problem. The buddy system is probably the most effective way for me to stay in line. So if I tell my mother, or I tell my brother, or I tell my girlfriend, or I tell my roommate, I tell any one of them, listen, this is what I'm going to do, then, and they enforce it, that works perfectly for me. But the problem is people are nice, and so most of the
mm,
people,
mm,
they're like, oh, don't worry about it, we'll let you go this time. But I need a person who's like, no, sorry, sucks to be you. And so when I found a couple of people like that, that works for me. But the problem is I'm very manipulative. So I find loopholes. So problems are only solved for as long as I don't have a loophole. And so
mm,
the real thing is you have to understand that when you do find yourself in a position of being lackluster or being not really hardworking, that it's not something that is easily solvable. It's not something that just goes away. It's not something that has anything necessarily to even do with your commitment and passion for the project. Um, it could be just an environmental factor, which it sounds like to me in your case. Uh, and and I don't mean environmental only in where you are, but I mean in terms of the conversations you're hearing, in terms of the people you're
yes.
associating with, in terms of the feedback you're getting, in terms of literally everything. It's this
You're spot
yeah.
on with
So
that.
it's an environmental situation. For me, it's literally a personal problem, which is a real problem because I can go anywhere in the world and I'm still not driven. So how do I get driven is a constant battle for me. And whereas, but a lot of it has to do, you have to recognize the kind of person you are, which is why I understand that now. I am what is typically referred to as an ENTP personality. So, an ENTP personality is a person who is a very good solutions person. You give me a problem, I love to solve it. You give me a conversation, I want to be there. You give me something new, and I am there. And the problem I have, the reason I can't stay driven, is because day one, it's an amazing conversation. But day two, it's the same conversation. And day three, I'm like, listen, no, I've solved this problem. It's time to move on. And so that's a big mindset problem I have, but it's part of my personality. And when I want to solve things, I've learned by finding out what type of personality I have, by finding out what type of person I am, by finding out what type of uh, uh, faults I have, I am able to go like, okay, here are 2 hours a day at about this time every day where I am quite driven. I am willing to be driven. And at that moment, that is when I focus the most on any given thing that I can do. Because I realize that is the only time of every day that I'm guaranteed to get results. And at a different, and I also supplement, I supplement that time with activities which I know my brain likes. Like, after I've written, I'm going to read William Gladwell's Outliers or something like that. And so I know my brain is going to read some new information, and that it's going to get stimulated by that. And so I'm going to trick my brain, essentially, into thinking like, and I have to basically lie to myself, and I know I'm lying to myself, but I have to try and find ways to make it work. And that's the best I can recommend for you, because that's all I've figured out how to do. And I feel like when I'm 50 and I listen back to this conversation, I'll be like, what an idiot, it's so simple. Or, dude, you never solve that problem. It never ends. And I find for me, what I have to do is I have to have many projects. By having many projects, I'm constantly keeping myself occupied. And that's part of why I love being on the radio. Every conversation is unexpected. Every word, you never know what's going to happen. There's always surprises. There are always surprises. And now, in living here in Russia, I don't just write. So I'll give you a good example. I've been writing on a few ideas that I have. And a big problem I had was I would write a story and then I would stop and I'd write a story, and I realized the problem wasn't that I wasn't enjoying writing the story. The problem was that I would write a story today and I would write a story tomorrow, and then on day 3 I'd have a great new idea for a story, and I'd be like, and all day I would spend thinking just on that idea, and I'd never write the story. And the next day I wouldn't write the story, because the new idea has now taken hold of my mind. And so what I do is, what I discovered works for me is, I can write a story. I choose a story I want to focus on as a predominant story. I think this is the story I want to finish the most right now. And I work on it, and I get a new idea. And the day I get that new idea, I write on that new idea. But the next day, I go back to the predominant story. But the day after, I go back to my new, cool, interesting idea. And then the next day, I go back to my predominant story. And then the next day, I go back to my cool idea. But then, I have another cool idea. And then I start writing on the other cool idea, but always alternating in my predominant story. And so I'm constantly making progress, at least on one. Whereas before, I just had a lot of ideas that I couldn't ever get down because I'd constantly get bombarded with a new idea. So that's how, in one little thing, I figured out, by tricking my brain by constantly writing the new idea, but also writing one story, I managed to do both. I managed to give my brain what it wants, in the sense of, yeah, he's working on these new ideas, but I also give my long-term goals, the other smaller part of me, that like, yes, but I am making progress, the person I want to be. And that's what I feel like, that's what I feel is the best advice when it comes to what you want to be, or where you want to go, if you're stuck with something in the present. If you have a problem in the present, what you should do is, don't forget what you want to do in the future. But give yourself alternating days, or give yourself alternating times. Be like, for 2 hours today, I'm going to focus on what I want to be in the future, because I still want to be that in the future. But for the next 2 hours after that, or the next 3 hours after that, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to work 100% on this new problem I have. Because this is a problem I need to solve, because it's distracting from my long-term goal. And sure, you might be fighting a losing battle and never actually solve that problem, but you'll actually still be making your progress on where you want to be. And so, inadvertently, end up where you want to be. Or, maybe by taking that time, you do solve where you want to be, or who you are now, because you're like, it's so simple, I just needed to do this. But now, you don't feel bad about taking the time to focus it, because you've just decided. That's the thing. A lot of the problems, I believe, people have, it's this feeling of no control. control is an illusion. But what you've got to do
Mm.
is, control is an illusion, but it's an illusion that makes people work, if that makes sense. When we have no control, we're
Yes.
like, and we do nothing. But when we have this illusion of control, it makes us more effective. So,
Yes.
you understand there are things you want to do in the future. You understand there are things that you need to solve now. But at the moment, your problem is when you are doing the one, you're feeling like, oh my goodness, I've got this problem of the present. But when you're not doing anything, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm not doing anything. And so what you're doing is you've ceded control. So what you've got to do is you've got to take that control back. And you've got to be like, you know what? No, I'm going to do both of those things. I'm going to take control and be like, you know what? I still want to do that thing of the future. And I don't know where I'm going in my life at the moment. And I don't know what I want to do. And I'm going to give 2 hours to the future. And I'm going to give the rest of the time to this overbearing problem. Or I'm going to give 3 hours to working on the project. And I'm going to give the rest of the time to this other problem. And it's a small change, but it's a mindset change. And the mindset change is no longer are you going to be stuck in between. No, you understand you've got a problem, and now you're going to try and work through it. And you're not going to feel bad about working through it because that's your focus. Solve this problem. And you're also not going to feel bad about the other stuff because you're still doing that too. And that's the best advice I can give you, because if you can give yourself that mindset change of being like, yes, this is a problem, but it's not a negative problem. You have to literally imagine it almost as like, imagine it like, have you ever played one of those text-based games where you have to draw your own little maps and you have to read the stories, and you're essentially creating this imaginary world in your head. Okay, so
You mean something like Zork?
yes, something exactly like Zork, yes. So,
Okay.
what you have to do is you have to imagine this problem as a text-based game. Of like, you are dropped in this world and you have no idea what's going on and you've got a little bit of information and most of it is ineffectual. But there's somewhere you have to go and you don't know where it is and you've got to work through it. And so you've got to kind of imagine yourself in that sense. You've got to imagine, like, you can, I can use a different analogy as well. Imagine yourself standing in front of a big black forest. And the big black forest in front of you is unknown, it's haunted, you don't know what you're going to find in there. You have absolutely no idea, but it's scary because you don't know. And you're afraid that if you go in there, everything you have already got is not going to be the same. But you have to do it. And I tackle it like that. So I still focus on this little bit of problem, but every day I'm battling a little bit of my way into the forest. I'm taking 2 or 3 steps into the forest, and sometimes you have to do like a 180 and be like, oh, I went down a dead end, or that was a terrible mistake. But that visual idea of like not being helpless, not being controlled by the situation, but instead battling it knowingly, to me is a big shift. And that's what I find gives me drive. It gives me a time to be effective, because now I don't feel bad when I take an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or even a whole afternoon and I just pretty much lie on bed and I watch YouTube videos and I'm like, what the flip have I done? I've watched YouTube videos all afternoon. I've done absolutely nothing. But no, I don't do that, because I've made sure that at the time I was productive, I did do something that goes towards the future idea of myself. And now I look at that as like, okay, I've spent then I reflect on it. I give myself time to reflect on it. I'm like, okay, so I spent a whole afternoon watching YouTube videos. Or I spent a whole afternoon literally just feeling like I'm wasting my life or something like. Then I try to like unpack it, if that makes sense. And I try to find if there's anything I can use for the positive. The first thing I try to find out is, okay, is there anything positive I can use this for? So, for example, so to make an easy example, let's say you enjoy playing games. a very good way to make something positive from playing games, if you feel like it's a waste of time, is maybe being a guy who uploads his gameplay onto the internet and giving commentary. So for people who are interested in the game, this is the first level, let's say, and you can watch me play it and see if you like this game, what I like about this game. Now, it seems silly, but by doing that small change, now instead of wasting your time when you're playing that game, actually you might be helping someone who's like, oh, should I get this game? Stumbles upon your video. It's like, that's useful. So you've taken something which you felt was a negative attribute and you've added a value to it.
Fair enough.
So you can find that for almost everything. So the first thing I try to do is there a positive way I can use this negative thing? The second thing you can ask yourself is there a good reason for me to not do this? A better reason for me to not do this? Or is it something I feel I need to indulge in on a more regular basis? Because often you'll find that the problem might be, I watched a whole afternoon of YouTube videos because I didn't want to send out an email. And not wanting to send out that email actually distracted me completely. So, what can you do to fix that? Well, maybe you decide you only answer emails once a week at a certain time. And by doing that, you completely eliminate that afternoon on YouTube sessions, because you do it at a time, at a limited time, so you minimize the damage. For a good example of something like for me is I'm terrible at replying to messages on social media. I am. You know that better than I do. So how did I solve that problem? I actually thought about this for a really long time, and I was like, I'm not replying to people. I'm not getting the messages back. And every time I start replying to someone, I will be distracted and end up browsing YouTube videos, for example. And I was like, what can I do? And I eventually came up with what works for me as a pretty great solution. I discovered I need to do the replying to social media messages at such a time that I literally am forced to stay on topic, to stay on key. So how could you do that? I found two ways. I reply, the first way, it was my first method. It was in Russia, when you take the train station, they have internet on the trains. So I spend a lot of my times on the train because I'm on the train for like 30 minutes. It's a very limited amount of time with a very limited amount of internet. And normally you don't have anything else to do. And so you're just sitting. But I was like, no, but at that time, I can message people. And so I've then gotten rid of my backlog of messages, because now, I've got 30 minutes where I've got nothing to do, and so I can say, and I also can't start watching YouTube videos because the internet is not good enough, and I'm not on long enough. So I've kind of forced myself into replying and becoming good at messages. And so I've taken that weakness and I've found a great way to negate all of its negative effects. And that's something I can recommend. That kind of process.
Again, really good advice. Thank you for all that. There's one more thing I want to ask you. This is in a very different... We're going to segue again.
Okay. I've got a question I want to ask you too after.
Okay, cool. Yeah, man. You haven't really asked me too much.
Yeah, I feel like it's a 180. Okay. On the first night, it was like mostly you, and now it's like, oh my goodness, I'm speaking way too much.
Well, everything you've said is incredibly useful, and maybe I just need to be reminded of it.
And you can buy it at my self-help CD.
Dude, okay, let me just ask you this thing. So, we were talking earlier about different versions of yourself, and here's my question. So, there's a version of yourself which is the one that only you will ever know, like the version, the full truth of yourself in your own head, right? There's that version. Then there's the versions of you that exist in everyone else's heads that's in your life. your parents, and your friends, your girlfriend, whatever. What happens when you start to become aware of the discrepancies in these versions? So you know who you are. You've now gone through this whole process. You know who you are. And then you have like a friend who you've just met and they see you in a certain way, and you're an observant kind of guy, and you're a introspective kind of guy, and you're good at judging people, and immediately you see this guy thinks I'm a certain way, and maybe he's totally wrong, or maybe he's right, but it's such a narrow piece of what I am, right? There's
The
that.
four windows
Then
to the soul.
there's right. Then there's the version of you that's in someone like a friend who's known you for a long time. That person has a more complete version, still not the full truth. Then there's someone like your parent who has raised you and knows all these things about you from when you're a kid, but now that you're living overseas doesn't know all these other stuff. So all these little versions. Does that bug you that there are these different versions? Do you consciously try to fill in the gaps? Do you just what are your thoughts on that? I mean, this is an enormous topic
I
in and of
think it's a
itself.
great question that you raise, because it used to be a big problem for me. It's not a
Okay.
big problem for me anymore. But it's only not a big problem for me. It only hasn't been a big problem for me post Russia, like in the last couple of years. It used to be an enormous worry that I had about these versions of myself that people see, and how I'm actually deceiving them, because I know that that's not the full me, and I know that I could show them more of me, but I'm not. And I actually solved that problem personally, in the sense that I'll tell you now. But so to answer your question firstly, because I feel like a lot of the times I've almost answered your question, and I'm sorry if I haven't answered them properly. It's not a problem for me. I
Okay.
don't have a problem with the different versions of myself. I know that even my own version of myself is not the complete version. Like, there are things I don't
Yes,
pick
so
up about myself.
that's where I was leading. That's where I was leading because I'm not. What I've basically done over the last few months is trawl through
Mm.
everything that I am, and a lot of the things that I've sort of chosen to underplay and chosen to frame differently than how they are as coping mechanisms, as a survival mechanism, as a way to make me feel better about myself, which is what we all do all the time anyway. But now I've just really looked at them for what they are and really accepted the ambivalence of you could see this in a terrible light, or you could see this in a, oh, I'm a unique little snowflake kind of way. But they're both true at the same time, and just this is something that I'm now struggling is the wrong word. Just I'm like really confronting it now and realizing how you kind of just have to lie to yourself and to everyone else
Well,
all the
no,
time
that's what I'm gonna
for
say.
their but for their benefit and for your own
Yes,
benefit.
but
Or is it purely just how you phrase it? Like,
no,
I'm wrong to say lie to yourself or lie to other people. It's more like I should say
no, no,
present a
no, no.
version. Like,
I
is it
understand.
all
I
about
understand
how
completely
you
what you're
phrase it?
saying, and I think you're correct for about 97% of the population. Uh, I
Okay.
think people do exactly what you've just said, and this applies to almost everybody. But I think there is a small minority of the people in this specific thing that, and I think I fall under it. I don't know how much of a choice I have in falling under it, but I do think I do, in the sense that how I solve this problem is by exactly not coming to that conclusion. by going the exact opposite way. So let's start. So initially, it used to bug me because the initial reaction people get about me in a social meeting is, this guy is really funny, he's always got so much energy, he's a great guy to hang around. I totally want to hang
Yes.
around this guy because it's going to be fun all the time. And that's who I
Yes.
am the least amount of time. That is the smallest version of myself. Like, it's not the small, but it is. I spend about 85% of my day quietly doing whatever I want. I'm never really quiet because I'm a loud person, but by myself, self-absorbed. But I understood that, and that's when I first started thinking about it, because it used to bug me that I'm meeting all these people who view themselves as friends of mine. But
Yes.
I didn't view them as friends of mine.
Yeah.
And the thing was, I came upon this problem because so many people got a bit frustrated with me or angry with me because I was neglecting the friendship. But in my mind, we didn't have a friendship. In my mind, I met them, we had a good time, but I was no more friendly to them than they were to me or anybody is to anybody, in my mind. But when I want to be, I can be extremely charismatic. And I don't normally meet people and speak the way that we're speaking in this conversation, because they'd just be like, oh my goodness, what a crazy person, or like, I don't want to
Yes.
speak about that. So most of the time, when I meet people, I really know the secret to meeting people is to let them speak about themselves. People love to hear themselves talk. And so I find a topic they're interested in and I let them go. And then I just pretend to care. And that's not a good thing. I'm just saying I found that to be the secret for most successful first meetings. There are different ones, but that's a generalization. So the problem is they end up leaving that, because most people don't do that. I realized later. I realized most people end up speaking about themselves. But I'm an idiot. It took me a long time to realize that most people meet someone and then talk about themselves. I like to talk about things that I do, but normally not on the first meeting. So what ended up happening is they would leave and they were like, I had the greatest conversation ever. Because this guy, we were just hitting it off. Whether it was a man or a woman, it's irrelevant to this. And so they felt like, this is a person, I've made a great new friend. And I left feeling exactly the opposite. I was like, thank goodness, I can go home now. I'm done. The night is finished. And that has got me into numerous difficulties throughout my life. But so I was like, okay. But when I became aware of this, I was like, okay, wait. I didn't want to be honest and say it was my fault. The first thing I wanted to be was like, no, it's totally their fault. They shouldn't be having this. But I was like, when 97% or 98% of the people are having this reaction towards you, you have to kind of be like, the common factor is you. So probably I'm the cause
Yes.
of this. And I had to be honest. And I had to be like, okay. Whether initially unintentionally, but now I'm intentionally misleading these people. And so I was like, that's probably a bad thing to do. And so I tried to live my life as morally as I think I can. To me, I feel like trying to be an ethical person is probably one of my highest standards. That I decided that for myself. It's not some other judgment. It's a personal decision. So,
Even though you don't necessarily believe in morals or ethics, you just think that practically it makes you a better person in the world. Would I be right in
yes,
saying
that's
that?
probably a good way to say it.
Okay.
Well, most things in life are social constructs, and you choose
Yes.
which social constructs you buy into. And I buy into the social construct of trying to make the world better for other people. I
Okay.
buy into the social construct of trying to be a decent person as much as possible. For example, I love the quote, the time is always right to do what is right. That's something many
Okay.
people who are good people would never subscribe to, but I subscribe to that. I think it's always your duty. It's something that I chose to be, and I do that knowingly.
So this is part of your process of making meaning.
Yes.
You got to a point when you're like, dude, actually there is no meaning. Everything is made up. It's all just social constructs. And instead of that leading in, well, it probably did lead you into a dark place for a while, but how you got out of that is you were like, well, so what? That's how it is. Now I get to
Yes.
choose. Now
No,
I
I
can
can.
be
It's
like,
like a grocery store. I want the
yeah,
biscuits and not the lettuce. I'm sorry, lettuce. Biscuits for me. But yeah,
okay,
exactly like that. Now, it once you get over the dark place, I will say there is, and I think this is true for most people. If you discover that there is no ultimate meaning, it's an extremely depressing thing. And my dark period lasted for years. That's the truth. It took me a long time, but over time, it was essentially one of the most freeing discoveries ever because it allowed me to be like, I knowingly choose what I believe is good. And
mm,
so when you have something like ISIS happening versus, let's say, uh, the rest of the world, what you realize is it's two social constructs competing against each other, and we both think ours are
yes,
superior. But so we're doing civilization questions. What kind of civilization do I want to live in? And that's how I choose my social constructs. What kind of world do I want to live in? What kind of species do I want us to be? If I was a human 10,000 years from now, what kind of world would I like to be born in? And I feel like maybe many of our decisions won't impact that, but some of them might. And so I try to choose my decisions like that. I try to play a civilization game. What world do I think is the best? And that's the world I try to live in. That was a personal get out of, that's how I got out of the darkness. That's that kind of thinking. So
okay,
now,
dude, okay.
okay,
Let me just to give you an hilarious quick insight into how dark of a place I'm in now. This is where I'm at. The place I'm at now is exactly that. What kind of civilization do I want for the future? What do I think is the best for humanity? A place that doesn't have me in. Like that,
why?
that's that's how
Terrible,
bad.
terrible
But
conclusion.
that's how bad it's got. I'm like, everything that's happened in my life to make me this way, almost like a survival of the fittest thing. It's like, oh, I am the one that must fall out of the race. Like, I've
But okay,
convinced
okay,
myself that I'm the one that's like, I'm the weak animal that
okay.
needs to be
So
fed off now.
I still,
Which is obviously retarded. Which
yes,
is obviously
okay. But
completely retarded. But that's where I'm
so
at
I
now.
still want to answer your Windows question because I haven't answered that yet. So
Yes.
remind me about that. But now explain that to me. So now here, because this is I think an important thing to speak about as it's just come up.
Okay.
How do you deem yourself to be not worth like being part of, let's say, humanity? Like what has led you to this conclusion? Because I'm trying to find out why you would see yourself of lower value to another. Like I understand I understand you're going through a dark time. I understand you feeling very depressed and you're like, I don't even see the point anymore. Like I am the problem. You feel in many ways.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
lead me down this path. How do you get to this position? Because your path might not be the same as mine. So how do you get to this
Okay.
position?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you might need to keep asking me more questions to lead
Okay,
me
that's fine.
into a clearer position, but the first thing that comes to mind is it, it feels like I've spent, I mean, I'm almost 27 now, and I've I've convinced myself that I've added nothing to the world yet. After 27 years, I have just leached off everyone. Um, and not only that, all the ideas that I have used to get me here, I now see are not the best adapted ideas for this world. For example, the the idea of having a purpose. What that's done is made me not it's made me not worry about the future. It's made me um, not be proactive in certain areas. It's made me not keep up with whatever certain technologies and be part of things, because I'm like, oh, there's the purpose of my life. It'll just work out by itself. And it's like that's been a positive. I viewed that as a positive thing until now. And now suddenly, oh, hold on. No. This is a terrible, terrible mindset. And maybe I just have to discard that now. Maybe all it is a process of growing up, and it's like, okay, now you've seen it. That's a bad idea. You need to chop that
Okay,
idea out.
so here's the thing.
Um,
You felt 1 month ago, you were like, I
yes,
can do, I should follow my dreams and stuff like that. So at that point, purpose was still a strong guiding factor in your mindset.
yes.
Okay. Then, about 2 weeks ago, or literally after a
Let's
month
say
ago,
2 weeks ago, whatever. Yeah.
recently, you felt like now there is no purpose, and that's completely derailed you, in the sense that you
Yes.
feel, okay, so let me start from what I understand, because that's essentially getting to, and this fact of no purpose gives you a feeling, just to confirm, the fact that you feel like you've got no purpose gives you this feeling of meaninglessness. So now everything has no value, and you least of all. Is that a correct?
Yeah, I mean, sure,
a
that's
very
a good
general.
place to
Yes,
start.
it's a good place. Okay, so what I can say to that, things that I have experienced, I have given nothing to the world. Yes, check. That was the height of my depression. Ideas not well adapted to the world. I can give nothing to the world. Check. I have no purpose. Check. The world is basically meaningless. Check. Okay, so from what you've said so far, I've experienced all of this. In my own way. Not in your way necessarily, in my own way. So, now, the first thing, if I'm very honest with you, is I have to just say what I think, and I think purpose is bullshit. So I'm just going to call it straight up. In my opinion, purpose is bullshit. It's a lie that we tell people. Not a lie that I tell people, but humanity as a general thing. So,
yeah.
Now, as to giving nothing to the world, I agree with you. I have given, at the moment I would say I've given nothing to the world as well. Or very little.
And, yeah, so
but wait. This is important. This is important. Okay,
yeah, okay.
So,
Okay.
now you're sitting in this position. And so I'll walk you through what my mind went through. Eventually, near the end. It took me a long time to get here, so I'm skipping like 2 or 3 years
Of course.
of being in this feeling and getting progressively worse. But ultimately, I realized there is no purpose. Everything is kind of meaningless. I've given nothing to the world, and my ideas and all. Those were key points I circled around. And I was like, okay, some people have suggested giving your own purpose, and that I was like, maybe that's a good idea. So I started with that assumption. Maybe I should give myself my own purpose. But I was like, but I have no good ideas, and I've given nothing to the world, and it's all for nothing. Okay, so then I thought, okay, maybe if I define my own purpose, it should be based on these exact negative qualities. I have no ideas that are well adapted. Maybe one of my purposes should be finding some ideas that make me well adapted. I was like, enough of the bullshit, enough of this rubbish. If my idea is not well adapted, that's my own fault. Get some ideas that are well adapted. If I've given nothing to the world, whose fault is that? That's my fault. I haven't even tried. Maybe I should give something to the world. And I define purpose. So my purpose has been defined out of that. My meaning, therefore, has also been defined. I was like, you know what? I've done nothing for the world. I haven't got good ideas. And these exact depression points, I was like, though that is my current purpose that I've given myself. If purpose doesn't exist as a real thing, but as a social construct to give us a direction, okay, I
Mm.
have to give myself direction. And the best way to give that direction, the starting point, is to work on these exact points that I've failed in so much. So if, for example, you say you have given nothing to the world, maybe that's exactly what your primary focus should be. Being like, okay, what can I give to the world? What do I want to give to the world? What do I think I want to, or the world needs? Okay, what ideas do those take? What don't I have of that? What do I need to learn? And does that mean you start from level 0, so to speak? Yes, it does. It means you generally
Mm.
have to start all the way over. But that's what I did from these points that we've discussed. And it's very important to understand that there are two ways to come out of those points. There is many people have come to this conclusion. There is no purpose. I've given nothing to the world. My words are not well. I've wasted 27 years. And then they've given up and they've ended up just wasting the rest of their life. And I drew a line. I was like, no more life will be wasted. I have wasted 26 years. I've still got, or I say 26, but at the time I was 24. So I have wasted 24 years of my life. And now is the time to be like, you know what, that's the last minute I've wasted. That's why it led me to the slightly bad decision of not giving myself even a little bit of enjoyment when we started this
Mm.
conversation. Because I went
Mm.
way too hardcore on this purpose business.
Mm.
But that's what I'm saying. So I gave my, and so that's the thing. I was like, I can either let this consume me, I can let it run my life and become completely filled by this feeling of darkness, or I can accept that it's going to be part of my life for as long as it's going to be, and it still is to some level. And
Mm.
some days it's worse than others. Some days it comes back and it rears its head and it takes me out for a week, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Mm.
But I constantly have to focus. I have wasted this much of my time. I still want to do this. I still want to give this to the world. I still want to get these ideas. And that is ultimately how I built my meaning back. Because that's how I chose my social construct. Because I was like, I've given nothing to the world. Even if it's a small thing, something I should give to the world is being an extremely ethical person as I understand it. Understanding that, let's say, something like abortion, which I am anti-abortion, and I'll just say that, and I know anyone is like, what? Crazy man. But I am. But I understand the ethics of it being a legal thing. I understand, in my opinion, morally it's wrong. Because I think we can get into that in a different time. But
Mm.
I understand the necessary legality of it. And so, this is the thing. So whereas before, that would have consumed me, this apparent contradiction would have consumed me and been like, how can you live like this? Now, it's so clear to me that you can follow something personally and yet do a different thing for other people who don't subscribe to that. It's so important. The
Okay.
imposition of wills, setting up a world, a blueprint where people can blossom, so to speak, in the best possible versions of themselves is the goal. To make as many people the
Okay.
best possible versions of themselves without denying other people that. And so that is
Yeah.
how I gave myself meaning when I was in your position. I decided that would be my meaning. After
Okay.
much struggle.
Okay. Well, let's just bring it back to that. You used the term Windows, but I guess like versions of yourself, and how the version of yourself that you carry in your head is so different from
Okay,
the versions you can see other
okay,
people seeing of yourself.
okay. So now I have to get back to your original
So
question.
and like with impositions of will, then at what point? I mean, I hate speaking in such general terms, but I don't really have a specific example. Well, let me give you a personal
Okay,
example,
okay.
and then you can just give your thoughts on that. So, could I use my Oma as an
I
example?
like you.
Because the story is the best. So, when my Oma has this version of me in her head where I am this like glowing beacon of awesomeness, and
Which is correct. It is a correct version of you.
when there is that part of me, sure, that is in me. And when I was in high school, I played cricket, and I was in the first team. And what that meant to her is she would like brag to all her friends about my son is the opening batsman of the first team, and it was this thing, and she swelled with pride, and for her there was all this meaning behind it, and she'd invented this fantasy of me as this outstanding
She lived
cricketer. One
vicariously
day,
almost. Yes.
right, right, and one day she calls me upstairs because her friends are visiting, and she says, my grandson, he's the opening batsman of the first team for the high school, and today they played a match, and he got a duck. And she was, she was so she had built up this
Oh my
fantasy
goodness.
that was so strong, and it like completely clouded her reality. And the word duck to her, she had no idea what
But
it
she
meant,
was
just
just
because it
whipping it
was
out
this
there.
jargony word. In her mind, it was this amazing thing. And here I was standing in front of these two friends of hers, and they both knew about cricket, and they looked at me like, what? Is this a joke? Like, and then I was stunned. I was like, Omar, you literally just called me upstairs to tell the most embarrassing thing of all time.
This is hilarious.
It,
Oh my goodness.
so, and then
Oh,
okay, so
great
that's her
story.
version. That's her version of me as a first. So the fact is, but the objective fact is, I did play first team cricket. I was the opening batsman. Now, my version of the story is completely different. My version of myself is, again, the fact is, yeah, I'm the opening bat for the first team cricket, but it's Hermanus High School, very average to say the least. We had no particularly good results. Um, I was never particularly happy with my performance. It was almost like someone needs to be the opening bat. I can do it. I probably would have scored much higher scores if I batted lower down in the order, but I'm the opening bat. Cool. I never performed particularly well, but whatever. I did
Okay.
that thing. That's my version of the story. And but here's the fact is I did open batting for the first team,
Yes.
so I could spin my own version of the story very differently. It's like completely in my own head, much like what I was saying earlier, where the past is just a story we tell ourselves. So if I meet someone now in a bar and I tell them this story, I could paint the image of me as an opening bat really differently. I could tell a story about this one time when I did bat really well, and then, but I know that I'm then putting a certain version of myself in his head, and it's not it's not a lie because I did actually do these
Yes,
things,
yes.
but I know that it's a very angled, a very slanted, and I guess a deceptive version of
Okay, and
things.
this is a good point.
And
Okay, sorry.
but that bugs me, and whether it's moral, it's not like the morality that bugs me. It's just that it just is. It's a very weird
Okay,
thing,
so
and I think that's how everything works
I
in
feel
life.
like this cuts exactly to why I said I want to really strongly get back to answering your question about does it
Okay.
bug me? So what I realized, and this is exactly where I left the story with, like, me realizing that I was the problem. I was basically using the charisma I had and the social skills I'd learned from my family, but I didn't really particularly uh, specialize in. So I wasn't really a particularly social person on a personal level, uh, but I knew how to do it because I lived with a big family
Mm,
where everyone was extremely social, and so I was kind of gifted these abilities that I wouldn't probably have learned had I grown up as a single child or
mm,
with any other parents, and all my DNA being the same because I was kind of nurtured in this environment of being good at it. But
mm,
so this is the critical thing. So you're saying you can give the slanted version. And this is what I said 97% of the people do. And here's where I want to come back. So I had this realization at the same point when I was going through this depression.
Yeah.
And I had many of these, but specifically on this, I thought about this. And I was like, okay, so I really enjoy sometimes slanting the version of myself. But afterwards, I don't enjoy that I've done it. So to me, I had to make a couple of decisions when it comes to the windows. I know there is a big part of me that other people perceive that I'm not aware of. I know that I can only control the parts of me that I know. And so I decided to give them the most honest version of myself. So, a difference that you might hear now when someone meets me, as opposed to when someone met me up until I was 24, is when someone met me up until I was 24, they would say something like, wow, Jacques is awesome, I want to be his friend, I really want. Now, someone might meet me and be like, yeah, he's okay, or, oh, he's a bit of a dick, or they might actually say something slightly negative towards me. But that was not unintentional. I realized I didn't want to be that guy's friend, or that, for the sake of, let's use a guy, could be anyone, but the gender neutral form of guy. A girl named Guy. So, I meet this person, and I decide that immediately they're a cool person. I probably would find them to be a satisfactory friend. But I don't particularly feel a compulsion to be their friend. And so, at that point, I just kind of shut down communication on them. I don't rudely turn around and walk away. That's not what I'm saying. But I'll be like, yeah, that's cool, and then I'll speak to my friends that are there, that I'm there with, or I'll go and speak to someone else. Because I've realized that I don't want to lead this person on falsely. And that's a decision I made. So I decided I want to give people the most honest version of myself. And that comes down to what we said last week with me getting rid of so many of my friends. So the people I'm still friends with, I decided also I'm going to be as honest with as I can. So many of the people who know me well will have noticed somewhat of a dramatic change in me over the last 2 or 3 years, or 4 or 5 years, or let's say 3 years is probably the closest to accurate. And they will think it's because now I'm opening up more, or because I'm changing. But actually, no, now I'm just being more honest about who I've always been, as much as I can. And I do that because I don't want to slant things. Because I decided that the version of myself I'm going to present to other people is the version I see myself as. That's the decision I made. As I understand, people will still misconstrue me. And it would take way too much time to always give the full detail of who I am. But in any interaction with me, I'm going to be exactly who I see myself as. And the reason for that is, I don't want to create false illusion. I don't want to be that person who gives the slant. That was part of my purpose that I decided for myself. The social construct I decided for myself was to be the guy who maybe you don't like me, but you're going to know what I'm thinking. Which is why, for example, there can be a situation where I'm sitting with a bunch of religious friends and I might say something which would be deemed inappropriate. Because I'd rather be who I see myself as than to lie to them. And that's part of the reason why in many of my social interactions, people would have a slightly more negative view of me. Because now, whereas before, I would have been like, I'm going to respect your ridiculous view in my opinion. I'm now either just going to be like cool and walk away, or I'm going to just say, I'm going to call you on your bullshit. I'm going to call you on it. And the reason I do that is because it helps me stay out of the depression state. It helps me stay more clear-minded. And it also makes me feel better when I think people know who I am. I honestly believe it's a personal belief, that my relationship now with my family is way better than it was before. And it's way better than it was before because I'm now being honest with my family. My relationship with everybody is better. Or if it's not better, it's better for me because I feel like I'm glad I know that position. So when you say these windows to the soul, and you have to pretend, I looked at that, and that was I'm not going to lie, it was a very tempting choice. Because everybody wants to be liked. Everybody wants to feel like no friction. Everybody. But I had to be like, that choice to me was like a poisoned chalice. It looked nice in that gold cup, but I felt like I would drink that and people would see the gold cup, but inside it would burn me. I was tired of going out and people being like, what a fantastic night, Jacques, yeah, but going home empty and feeling like, oh, I really hated that. I was tired of that.
Yeah.
Because it was not, that was to me the exact wrong thing. And so I decided I would rather become who I really am and not have the poison chalice, in my opinion. So I try not, and it's not to say I'm not perfect, but when I realize I've deceived someone, I will actually now be like, listen, I lied to you. I will just be straight up. I'm like, I was wrong, or I lied to you as much as possible. It's not always easy, and sometimes I feel, but it's something that I do that works for me. So,
yeah, dude, I'm a bit scared of
indeed, that
letting that out because there is so much
collateral damage is the worst kind of damage.
No, it's that there is so much nastiness inside me that I've kept in check my whole life.
Yes, I am an asshole. I would just like to point that out. People never believe me when I tell them, but I am an asshole. But I've come to accept, by being honest, you also get a better view of other people, in my opinion, because now it lends itself a certain kind of visibility, because you start to recognize in other people the bullshit that you used to do more plainly, because now you're not doing it. And so I feel like everybody's actually an asshole. Everybody's actually a little bit. And the thing is, so when I say I'm an asshole, I don't really feel particularly bad about being an asshole. I don't feel particularly bad about doing some nasty things. I'm not going to go out of my way to do something nasty. I'm not going to go out of my way to be mean to you. I'm going to try to be nice to you. But I am no longer being nice for the sake of being nice, or letting people, if I think something, I'm going to say it. And that means sometimes people are going to be uncomfortable. And I advocate that path, but I understand that not everybody will take that path or is suited for that path.
What about with people who are close to you?
Honest. Upfront.
Okay.
Hard. Tough. Sucks. Good luck.
Yeah.
The thing is, here is the problem. The problem is...
let me ask you, which was harder? Was it harder to be honest with people who are close to you, or with not, like with new people you meet?
It was way harder to be honest with people who are close to me. Okay. It was really easy for me to be honest with people I just met, because I didn't have an emotional attachment to them. So it was to be honest with you, it was a big change, because I went from mostly bullshitting to being like, okay, now what do I do? That was an interesting learning curve for me, because it took away quite a lot of...
because what do you do? Because, I mean, how can I phrase this correctly? It's almost like you were a better person with that crazy, gregarious, outgoing, social...
Okay, but I wasn't. I was the same person.
Yeah.
This is the thing. So here's the truth. The reason I advocate the path I advocate is, so here's the thing. I wanted to be honest with myself. And I wanted to be honest, and I wanted people to know me as well. But I was always afraid. Okay. So the thing is, here's a couple of things I realized. By unpacking all of my true feelings, I got a feeling of real freedom. It didn't last like no feelings ever last, but it did give me a real feeling of, now that everything's out in the open, I never have to pretend again. If I do something that people do not approve of necessarily, it's not going to be as big of a shock to them because I've already done other things that they don't approve of. And also, if I do things that they don't approve of, at least they will know that that is the worst thing, because they will know I'm upfront, because I've been upfront to them. But that was not the thing. The freedom was nice, and if it was just the freedom, I'd say, well, it's not that important. But the real truth is, to me, it was life-changing, because for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to be different people. I could always be the person I am. For the first time, I didn't have this weight on my shoulder of like, oh my goodness. Because now if I didn't want to hang out with you, I just didn't hang out with you. No. So I got all this weight lifted off of me that I'd been carrying for years. And so it was a great move. And it's not that I wasn't as gregarious as that. I can still be that gregarious. And sometimes I do want to be that gregarious, or that charismatic, or that outgoing. But now I share that with the people I'm actually friends with. And the rest of the time, I'm just not that guy. And if I'm not that guy now around my friends, I'm not that guy. But what it did do is, for me, it was great, because it slowly eats away at you. It slowly does. And you don't realize to what extent until you've unpacked it all. And when you do, you'll be like, wow, I can't believe I was carrying that much stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it will be easy, and that's not, but you can't find yourself until you're honest with yourself. And that's why almost no one ever finds themselves, because they're not honest with themselves. They're not willing to be like, I'm not going to be willing to admit that to someone. And the thing is, when you lie to, let's say you lie to your Oma, when you fed that lie about the cricket, you knew it was a lie. But
hold on, no. There's no. Hold on, I think you're using.
No, okay. Maybe I'm using the wrong term. But when you fed the story that gave your grandmother pride, you knew she was gaining pride from it, and you knew.
Oh no. Okay, you misunderstand. I didn't ever feed a story to her.
No. Okay. I phrased it badly. Let me rephrase it. But you knew.
Let's say that I did.
Okay,
though.
but you didn't speak to her. But what I'm saying is, at some point, you knew, whether it was through her own mind or through yours, at some point you knew that she was being unreasonably proud.
Okay, yes.
Sorry for phrasing it, but that's what I mean. So at some point you knew that. And at that point you had a decision. You could be like, yes, it's true, I do that, but honesty. Or you could be like, I kind of like it that my grandmother feels that, or I don't want to upset her that I don't feel that way. And so you chose the easy route. But in doing so, you didn't only lie to your grandmother. You actually lied to yourself. Because you were like, it's okay that she's doing that. And you were telling yourself it's okay that she's doing that.
But I really don't believe that it's okay for anyone to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what
eats you.
I don't like a world where people have these crazy delusions.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do nothing about them to dispel them. But there I am doing it. I'm just letting her know. Because I don't want to hurt her.
Okay, but so you see, so now here's the thing. So I looked at that and I was doing the same. And I also, like you, don't want to live in that world. And I decided that I don't want to live in that world, and that means I have to make a change. And so I started not living in that world. For me. And that's the only way that I could do it. So the truth is, maybe your grandmother would have been hurt. But I can guarantee you that probably your grandmother, what I've discovered is, would have had a slightly bigger respect for you, for being like, it's not as great as you think. because X. But she would have been like, she might not have completely accepted your point of view, but she would have known your honest feelings. And so even if she then
Okay.
didn't agree with what you said, she would respect that you were trying to make sure that she knew how you felt about it. And so to the people that matter, this honesty is actually better, because you get to learn the deeper person. And
Mm.
this is the thing. If you actually are interested in a person, getting to learn the deeper person is more fulfilling, and it builds a better
Yeah.
bond.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's why I found that the being honest thing is great, because it makes it's freeing, and it builds better relationships, but also for you, it gets rid of that terrible negativity that you had before, and it also it allows you to start to live the way you want to live, because these
Mm.
delusions you let people have restrict you in your lifestyle.
Yes. They restrict me.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the thing, and that's why it's so important.
Mm.
And so that's why I wanted to come back to this Windows answer to give you my run through on that, because I think it's very important to explain why exactly I don't go for the pretend option that so many people do, because I did it for so long. And I did it even for a little bit while I was aware, but then I made an active choice to not participate, because I was like, and obviously no one is perfect. Occasionally I'll still find myself like, I did that. But the thing is, when you discover it, then you've got to be like, okay, I've got to fix it. And to me, that is something that I feel was that was actually the first step towards me getting out of the depression, because that allowed me to start living according to the purpose I gave myself. I couldn't do
Mm.
that. That's the thing. I was in this almost infinite loop of, I need purpose, but there's no me. But I had to keep living this pretend life that, like, oh no, I'm extremely religious, I'm extremely happy, I'm extremely friendly, and I couldn't get out of this depression loop completely. I couldn't forge a better life for myself, because all these constructs that I was pretending to be forced me in this snare. And for me, by deciding to be honest, it then gave me the freedom to choose my purpose, to choose how to give meaning to the world. But I couldn't have done that before I decided to be honest with myself. And I could only be honest with myself, obviously, first through sharing.
It sounds like, yeah, it sounds like we've just done a big loop now. And that very first point you made tonight of first you need to find out who you are. But it's no good just finding out who you are. You need to then be like, all right, well, I am this thing. Now I need to live this thing.
Exactly.
If this is what I am, I need to now live this
Exactly.
thing. Yeah, so that's, I mean, being honest with yourself is that. You need to be like, okay, now, if this is what I am, I'm going to tell people this is what I am.
I'm going to be very honest with you. That's exactly what I've been trying to say, and I don't know how you phrased it that well, because I've been trying for this whole conversation to say it like that, but I just haven't been able to do it.
Oh man, so that's like the one skill that I really do have, which I wish there was a job for it. Maybe I just haven't figured it out yet, but I can I get stuff very easily. Like I get stuff, but you're good at really explaining and noodling and wafting and like saying all these points and all these explanations. I can just be like, okay, this is what it is in like a sentence.
Yes, I
And
often
but
dream
then
for that ability.
which makes me terrible at conversation because I'm like, okay, yeah, but why speak for half an hour about Christianity where I can just be like, okay, listen here, this is what's going
Yes,
on.
don't you think I would love it if I could be like, this is what's going on. Job done. No, 30 minutes later, I'm like, my goodness, why have I taken this long walk to get to this point? So, okay, I wanted to, because this actually leads beautifully into the question I wanted to ask you earlier.
Okay.
Now that you've understood the point I was trying to make, and you phrased it so beautifully, what worries you about really finding yourself? about accepting who you are, about this is who I am, and now I'm gonna. What worries do you have about that?
The most immediate thing. Here's the most immediate thing. I'm living with my parents, and there is 27 years of me not being fully honest with them, in the sense of there's like a version of me that I let them believe. And it's true, it's all true. I've never lied to them, but I've just kept things from them, which mean that it's not the full me, that they don't know the full me. And we also are not a family that share stuff. So I need to start and just start expressing myself. And I have started, and it's been tough. And I've now learned things about them that I've never known, that they've never shared. And a lot of it has been very negative. No, negative is the wrong word. A lot of it's been quite dark, though.
Okay.
It's been heavy stuff,
Yes.
very, very heavy stuff. And I certainly feel closer to them now. But the reason that all the things that we've kept from each other, both me from them and them from me, is none of us ever want to burden each other with our own personal stuff. And that's been one of the biggest limiting beliefs in my life, which I'm slowly starting to get better at. And especially having the girl who I dated in Korea, she helped me a lot with this. Not um, not that she did anything on purpose, just that being around her helped me just start expressing myself, letting it come out, realizing, oh, it's okay to say these things. You are burdening someone, but that's kind of the point. If you're gonna get to know someone, if you are invested and you do want to get to know someone, you've got to share it all, the good and the bad. And um, you have to that person, if they want to be around you, they have to be able to deal with and take on your silliness and your hardships and your triumphs and the whole package. So that's what I think and believe, but now I need to act it. Now I need to start forging this new ground and sharing stuff with people.
So that's why I wanted to ask you. So I come from a very sharing family. Oh, I first wanted to say that's a good point you made about the burdening, because it's not something I've really thought about before. In depth, in the sense that I have thought about being honest, and it's important for people to understand who I am. But I haven't really thought about that actually being a burden on their minds, and I think that's something I should be
Well,
more aware of, because it's something I didn't really consider that fully when embarking on this, so to speak.
my life experience has been like this. I'm the guy who on purpose will let other people talk about themselves when I meet them. I enjoy that. I would rather hear about them than me talk, because I love hearing other people's stories, and I only care about the deep stuff. Like I only care about the burdens and that. That's the thing that excites me. But
Interesting.
when I've seen other people share, or when I've shared stuff, or when I start a conversation with most people and I want to bring up this kind of thing, it immediately depresses them, and I can see it burdening them, and they want to change the topic. And that maybe because I'm interested in introspection, and I'm interested in finding out who I am, and I'm interested in exploring these spaces, and they're not. They're scared.
Yes, yes.
And now I'm like, I can't alienate everyone always by just only talking about heavy stuff. And if they don't want to talk about it, then they don't want to talk about it, and I have to let that alone. But what that means is the, the deep stuff, the stuff that interests me, where I can really be genuine. There's so there's so few people who want to engage on that level.
Well, that's a good point you raise, because I I enjoy hearing interesting, deep things from the people I decide are my friends. I just have no interest in hearing them from people I don't think I'm going to see again, or more than once again.
Mm.
But it's interesting for me because you say there are so many people. Now, here to me is the thing. I decided I only wanted a very few number of friends. So I only have like 4 or 5 friends who I actually share things with. And they're all friends I've chosen that are willing to have these kind of conversations with me. Because those were the kind of friends I wanted to have. But
Yeah.
how do you handle, because I don't particularly have this problem. How are you friends with someone who you can only really speak surface level with?
Um, it it is a false thing. It's a like, how can maybe let's phrase it differently. Like there's people that you okay. Let me use Muay Thai as an example. So I go to Muay Thai because it's good for me and I love doing Muay Thai. But then there's other people at the gym and you spend 90 minutes with them twice a week. So you have to interact with them, and it's all the surface level stuff and small talk and whatnot, which bores me to tears, and I couldn't care less about
Agreed.
this
Okay, that's
the
agreed.
rugby score. Like, dude, I don't care. I just don't care. But I know that I'm being stupid. Like, I should I should
But yeah, people who
you know
like the
what I mean.
small
Like
stuff are now
you
being
have to,
like, what?
but you have. It's like I'm not being honest with myself if I like try and pretend and but I can see them. I mean, they immediately shut off, and I just become that weird dude in the gym. If I'm like, oh, dude, whatever, rugby, I don't care. Um, you know what I mean?
Oh, we did it the
It's,
gym. Ah, that's too funny. But no, but maybe you should try and engage in a common ground of mutual like. That's what I
yeah.
tend to do.
So
So, for example, when I'm gonna have regular interaction with someone, but we're not ever going to be more than surface level friends, I will find a common ground. So, for example, I like football. I So if I meet someone and they happen to like football, that's a great surface level topic because it's something almost a little bit brain dead that many people can communicate about that I have a slight interest in.
mm,
And so then I'm not being not me. I still enjoy the conversation, but it's something that we can pass 5 minutes by. So I normally will I like to probe people for who they are initially still, because I like to find out whether they are someone I want to be friends with.
mm,
But immediately if I find a small topic of common ground, that will be what I speak about with them most of the time. So in that first interaction, or that first or second interaction, I'll try to find out something about them that can lead to a common ground friendship. And that way, if we hang out at the gym, I can be like, so did you see the game on the weekend? And then we don't have to speak about the rugby, which I also don't care
mm,
about, or the the people selling raffle tickets, whatever small talk it may be. So I
mm.
engage in small talk in topics that I enjoy. I try to set it up
Mm.
like that. It's not always easy or possible, but that's what I try.
Yeah, I mean that is a good point. I guess I've done that before. Um,
It might be
yeah, uh,
manipulative though, so maybe I'm giving you bad advice.
but maybe that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're just leading it where you want it to be led, and if they will go along with you, then fine.
Yeah, because they enjoy having that conversation too, so that's a good point. But the other
Yeah.
thing I wanted to ask you is you said, so you mentioned last week and you mentioned this week that you're not really a family that shares. And I am from a very big sharing family because that's just the way we are. So take me through like the mindset of a not sharing family. What happens when there's something serious and you don't really share it? Like how does that play out in your in your development of who you are, like finding yourself? Like, so here's this big thing that just happened to me and I'm like, "Hey mom, this happened to me." And she's,
No, no,
"Yeah,
no.
so how does that
That
yeah,
doesn't.
yeah.
It
So
doesn't. That doesn't
run
happen.
it through for me like,
Literally, you just don't talk about stuff. Um, just we just don't talk
but
about
how do
stuff.
you know what you talk about and what you don't talk about?
So it's like okay, so if we're at supper, that's when we talk, and because normally everyone's doing their own thing, and then at supper we all sit together at table. We always sit together at table, at the dinner table and at supper. But it's like you just talk about what you did in your day. Like I went to school, and oh, there's birds outside, and they laid eggs. It's like really mundane stuff.
So okay, so a real question then.
But the deep, like none of the conversations that we've had, we would have at home, and when something would come up, it would get shut down quite quickly. For example, like I once just brought up evolution.
Yes.
At the dinner table once, and got shot down so quickly because number one, like my parents don't really think about these kind of things, and they have very preconceived, or I should more my dad has like certain preconceived notions about stuff that he's not willing to engage in another point of view.
Okay. I do understand. My stepfather's similar in that one specific respect. He's got certain ideas like, that he's stuck with, almost.
Yeah, and every time I've brought up other ideas, there's either that doesn't interest them, or they don't want to talk about it, or there's a preconceived notion that comes up. But it's just never been the thing. Like we don't ever say,
I understand,
this awful thing happened to me. It's just you keep that to yourself, or you say, oh, this thing happened to me, I don't want to talk about it. Like,
wow, that's so weird for me though. So I remember we had a conversation. I was having dinner at your house one night, and we spoke about this was before you even went to Korea, I think. We were speaking about girls and like how to what's the best way to approach girls or something. I think I might have picked up on a previous comment. So was that a particularly like awkward kind of thing for me to do in your family, and then conversation to be part of, because you wouldn't normally speak about it and I was just kind of obliviously speaking about these kind of things?
I can't remember the specific example you're talking about, but it could be.
Because I got the sense that like maybe I shouldn't have started the conversation very soon into the conversation.
Yeah, you were probably right. You're right.
And so is that the kind of, you get this kind of like little feeling inside, like, oh, maybe let's not speak about this. It's very strange for me.
Yeah, but again, dude, to be perfectly honest, so much of it is, it's just myself. Like, it's just me.
Yeah, fair enough.
Having this, it's my preconceived notion that certain topics I bring up are not going to go anywhere. So why even bring them up, even though they have meaning for me? And they're happy living their way, and they're happy doing things the way they've always done things. Why stir the pot now? Like, what good can it do?
Okay. That's fair, I understand. So, I think final question.
Yes.
You have always had a pretty good idea of where you want to go. Compared to me.
I have been doing something.
But I mean, you've always had a very good future ideas of like, in the future, who do you want to be or what do you want to do? So maybe they've changed a lot, but you've always been quite absorbed in the future. Of yourself, the future version of yourself. Is that a correct assumption or not?
Okay, this is how I could explain it now. I've always had a fantasy of myself one day in the future. That's what I've had, this fantasy. That's the best word for it, because it is just a pure
So you have
fantasy.
this future fantasy of yourself. And my question is, how did you develop this future fantasy? How did you come to this future fantasy? And how have you been living towards it? Like, so what have your plans been? So part of this conversation of finding yourself is who you are, but what you want to be as well. And so I think you've always kind of had the what you want to be down, but without the who you are. So maybe
that's weird, man.
Yeah,
that's almost like that's like a version of me in your head that I don't think is
Oh,
true at
really? Really?
all
Okay, okay. So
whatsoever.
I'm just completely
But
wrong on this. Okay.
um, but I can see how I would have given that impression to a lot of people, and because I can come across very self-assured and very confident, and and I am self-assured and confident, but even when I don't know where I'm going, because it's always stemmed from this belief and this belief of I do have a purpose and I am going somewhere, and it doesn't matter that I don't know where it is, and it doesn't matter that I'm maybe not actively working towards whatever, or maybe more just everything I do is building me up towards this thing, and I don't even know what this thing is, but I'm going
Okay,
there.
okay.
Um, I guess how did these things get built up? I got I got hooked on certain ideas that I that created a really nice fantasy picture in my head. For example, like when I first read the game, I thought, "Oh, that's me. I'm gonna have this dude who's got all these girls, and I'm gonna become this guy who just has animal magnetism." And it was a fantasy in my head, and it was a one day I'll end up there. I mean, that's the honest truth. It was purely just one day I'll be that. Um, Playing guitar and all that as well. It, I have this fantasy in my head of being a rock star, of being Iron Maiden famous, of
It's a great
Sensei taking over
fantasy.
the world.
Yeah.
But it's a fantasy because I'm not there. And what have I done towards it? I've written a lot of songs. I practice guitar, but I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 17, and now I'm almost 27. That's 10 years, and I, how much further am I really? I still can't even play all of the songs I've written. I mean,
Uh,
it's so, and obviously you need to set a goal and you work towards it, but this is part of what has caused all this
okay.
depression now.
So here's
I'm like, I've been working towards this stuff, but how far have I really
okay.
gotten? Not that
But so
far.
here's the reason I asked the question. You had this fantasy, and I feel like, in my opinion, I could be completely off here. So I'm gonna go out on a
Mm.
limb and
Throw it
hazard
out
a
there.
guess
Throw
here.
it out there.
That the reason you haven't achieved many of the things in your fantasy is precisely because you haven't acted on who you are. So for what I mean by that is you have had this fantasy of being a rock star, playing these songs, but you haven't fully lived it
Mm.
because you've
Mm.
always held a little bit back. You've always been like, no, no, no. I want to play guitar, practice, but I'm not gonna fully live it. You've had this thing of like, I want to do X, I want to be this kind of person, but you haven't fully lived it. And I feel like a lot of maybe you wouldn't have been a famous rock star necessarily, but I feel like you would have had better answers to some of your fantasies if you had lived more fully your actual
You
self.
are you are completely right, and that's again feeding into why I've been so down lately. Is because now I'm realizing it's just all my fault. Like it's just all it's
Everything
I
is our own faults.
I mean, not in a not in such a dark sense. It's more my own doing. Everything that I am experiencing now is all my own doing, and all these fantasies and beliefs and things I had were just psychological tricks I was playing on myself to not face the truth.
Okay.
And now I really am facing the
But
truth,
no, but
and
I think
it's a bleak
you're
truth.
missing the point of what I'm trying to say. I'm you you're right and you're wrong, I think. You're right
Mm,
in the sense that yes, those there were psychological tricks you were playing. That wasn't the real truth of who you were living. Um, and you had this false idea of where you were going. But I feel like a lot of that has to do with actually not living as you want to live.
mm,
So you're
mm,
correct in the sense that that's what happened. But I think you're wrong in the sense that if you had lived who you wanted to live, you might have been more successful in some of your fantasies. So that's why I
Yeah.
advocate kind of being honest with yourself, because that's when the action starts to happen. Because now, like, okay, you've messed up till now, but now you've got a chance to get yourself back on track, work towards whatever it is you now want to work towards.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. Um, where where I have seen some positive results is in this field of goals. When I was in Korea, in my first year, didn't really actively pursue anything, but in my second year I did, and then I got this amazing girlfriend, and the way I structured our relationship was exactly what I wanted. It was, I realized that I actually I want one girl and I want to have a deep relationship. That's way more important to me than sleeping around with tons of girls. Like that was that was the fantasy of that led me into this place where now I know myself better. So the fantasy was useful that the game, the player, the crazy guy goes to a bar and picks up girls. That's still it would be awesome to have that skill, but that doesn't add deep meaning to me, and I don't think that's necessarily who I want to be or who I am. But I do. There are certain things that I want in a relationship, and a certain type of woman I want, and I'm finding that out more and more and more.
That's fair.
But
I think that's a good thing to know
eh,
about yourself.
yeah, and also that I'm very happy not being in a relationship as well. Whereas that was a big deal for me in school and university. I was consumed by being single, and everyone else had girlfriends, and it ate at me. And then when I went through that, now I'm out on the other side, and it's great, but I'm fine being single, chilled.
uh, it's the false idols we set ourselves up for. These false like
Yes.
idealizations. It's true. Okay.
Um, but having, even if it is just a fantasy, having that does make you work towards something. And even if you don't get to the apex of your dreams, at least you've done something. And that's pretty cool. And that does make me feel better because I have progressed so much. It's just nowhere near where I want to be. And that's something that I now have to deal with as well. That it's wow, there's still so much work ahead of me, and I almost have to start from the beginning again.
But the thing is, though, if you've ever get to the point where you're like, now I have found myself, you might as well kind of stop living, though, isn't it? Because then you're
Mm.
done.
Again, man, that's like what we spoke about last time, that living the dream thing. Now I've lived the dream. Now I've done it. Now what?
Yeah, it's a big thing that you gotta
That
have more
that's
dreams then, man. Live dream number 2.
mm,
uh,
that's the thing. Now I need to figure out what that is, and I'm not sure what that is. Or uh, like so I still would the band. I would love for this band to happen and love to make music for real and start gigging for real. But I will need to get a job and support myself while I level up and while if you're gonna come back to South Africa or whatever, or if I need to start something by myself, whatever
I
happens.
will say,
But
here is a real world fact
mm,
that we and many people like us are in a position to realize many of their goals. But the first time around, we just throw it away. And then, we don't completely throw it away, just like you said. Some things we do progress into some, but for a large majority of the stuff, I think, we just kind of, we're like, it's gonna just fall into place. But then,
mm.
now, we are like, no, you want to actualize those dreams because you haven't been doing it. But now, because you haven't used that first opportunity, now there's no time anymore for just focusing solely on those dreams. Whereas before,
Mm,
you
mm,
could have
mm,
maybe
mm.
spent 6 hours a day or 7 hours a day purely on that one dream.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you could have made it work. And some people have been fortunate enough to go for it and do it. The, the side effect of going the route that both of us have gone is that we can still do that, but we do have to accept some of the real world kickback, that now there are other obligations that you have. And that
yes.
is just one of the things that I think is so important, because to understand and to know, because now make sure you don't do that to yourself even more. Now that you understand
Mm,
that, get ahead of the game, so that you don't find yourself when you're 35 being like, oh my goodness, from 27 to 35 I've messed up again and it's now twice as
mm.
bad.
Yeah, that's all true. Dude, I definitely feel myself. I'm getting tighter and dumber and less eloquent. Is there anything else you want to
No,
say,
no, I think
or
that's a good point to end the conversation on, because we've been going for a while